Welcome to the GSMC Business News Podcast, the show dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning business, technology, and the stock market. Get a head start on the day as we keep you updated on the latest goings-on Wall Street, money, jobs, and technology. If you're looking for a podcast to keep you informed and ahead of the game in business, the GSMC Business News Podcast has you covered.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Business Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Moriah, and thank you so much for tuning back in. Today, we're going to be talking about the restaurant industry. I think every business has been affected either positively or negatively by the COVID-19 pandemic, and some industries have seen an increase, like the logistics and the courier industry, like we discussed earlier this week, and other businesses such as the residential real estate business are seeing an increased or a boom in sales. Some industries that have seen losses would be like the travel industry and the commercial building industry. A lot of people aren't in need of commercial spaces anymore. I don't think that had anything to do solely on the pandemic. I do believe the pandemic definitely influenced that. However, with a lot of businesses going online, a lot of businesses shifting gears to the e-commerce industry, we were already seeing a decline in some commercial spaces being purchased, but now we're seeing a bigger decline. That's why the residential industry is going up. So there's definitely been a few industries who have taken a hit. One industry that has taken a hit but has also seen a growth in sales is the restaurant industry. I think during this time, we've seen a few fluctuations in some industries, like the stock market, for example, that's been known to fluctuate up and down. It always fluctuates up and down. However, the pandemic obviously has its effects on it as well. So that's the same going into the restaurant industry. So we'll be diving into that the same way we've been doing some other industries. And then we'll be talking about who the biggest spenders are during this time, who's eating the most takeout, which type of restaurants are seeing the biggest return for the efforts that they've been putting in during the pandemic. You know, a lot of rules and regulations have changed. A lot of people have had to see what the CDC is saying and also stay within guidelines and rules and regulations of their city, their town, their state, their country when trying to operate business, especially with restaurants, because food, obviously, it's what we're intaking, and we want to be very, very mindful and very, very careful of what we're eating and who we're eating from, where we're eating at. You don't want anyone breathing in your food. Now, granted, prior to the pandemic, I never liked when the cooks never wore gloves or they didn't wear hairnets. I always felt that maybe they should wear masks because they are breathing over the food. So with the onslaught of the pandemic, a lot of restaurants are just figuring out different innovative and creative ways to continue operations, to get back some of the losses that they have experienced during the pandemic. And today we'll also just be getting into how you can start your own restaurant. I'm big on entrepreneurship, if you can't already tell. I love to discuss business, but I also like to figure out ways that I can either become a part of a new wave or a new trend, or help others who are trying to become a part of that wave or new trend. So we'll definitely be talking about how to get your own started. Obviously, you want to add some caveats because of the pandemic. Not sure how long the effects will last. I do know, for example, in educational settings, they are relaxing the social distancing space. So we might be seeing that as well. I know in some states, like education, other industries are able to open up at 100% or close to 100%. So we'll definitely see some changes. So we'll be talking about that. And then always, like always, we'll be talking about some hometown heroes. I'm excited. I love eating out. I am definitely the kind of person who likes to go out and eat and have a good time. So I wanted to highlight some some restaurants around the country that I've heard of and that I've been to, and that I think you all should maybe take a peek when you're in this city and see what they got going on. All right, so let's hop right into it today. Again, we're talking about the restaurant industry. And if you didn't know, give you some background information. Restaurants started in France. I think a lot of us know that food, in general, that style of eating food, definitely came from Europe. The way that we can do it publicly. So in France, there was a soup maker, and he created a restaurant, not too large, where his guests could come and have a quick bite to eat and, socialize and things like that. And then that's where the name restaurant came from. And if you notice, we have restaurants pretty much the same in almost every language. If you don't speak a certain language, if you hear something close to a restaurant, you'll figure out what the conversation is about. I think food is like music; it's a universal language. With a slight hint of your preferences, right? So we definitely got that from France. Shout out to the French. I absolutely love eating out at restaurants. So that's cool. Just a fun fact, the largest restaurant is located in Damascus, Syria, and it's called the Damascus Gate Restaurant. It is the largest in the world. It seats 6,014 guests. I can't even imagine that. I always feel overcrowded. Now, mind you, this is before the pandemic. I always felt overcrowded in a full American restaurant. So I couldn't imagine sitting around 6,013 other people in one space, but I would love to go see it. So something on the bucket list. If you've been listening to the podcast, you've heard us discuss the travel industry, and things are beginning to lift. Some regulations are beginning to move out of the way, so maybe I will get a chance to eat there. I just thought that was something cool to give you all. I thought it was a cool fact when I was doing my research for this episode. And the biggest chain, I'm sure you know, is McDonald's. McDonald's is the biggest fast food chain, especially in the United States. That's it's like a staple at this point. The kids love it. I think my body just doesn't take to McDonald's anymore. I ate it way too much as a kid, but I'm never too grown for some French fries and a McFlurry. So, yeah. Because of this, I can see why restaurants were just so anxious to get back in the swing of things. In June of last year, 2020, that was one of the highest restaurant sales month for the year. And that's because, for all the months prior, there were strict guidelines, and I know in the city of Philadelphia, nothing was open. So you can go and take out food, but you had to order in advance. You couldn't go order at the window. You had to call in, put your order in, and they would give you a time frame from when you could come. Some restaurants were just closed. Some restaurants closed indefinitely. So a lot of different restaurants were hit very different, but in the summer months, that's when a lot of places begin to lift restrictions and open up more. And because it was the summertime, it's kind of hard to regulate what goes on outside during the summer, especially if, everyone's keeping their distance. And we saw an increase in outdoor activity during the pandemic because a lot of businesses and places were closed. So during the summer months, a lot of restaurants were able to open up, kind of try to get that money back that they had lost. Around that time, the sales were about $47.4 billion. And they were around $30 billion prior to that. And then they were even lower prior to that, around $18 billion between January and February of last year. So again, because of the season, a lot of things began to be adjusted. You saw that, a lot more people going out. Again, a lot more restrictions were lifting. But overall, the industry was down about $116 billion. That's a whole lot of money to see as a loss in sales. And if you don't know, a lot of the individuals who work in the food industry were not able to work. I know some people specifically who were simply waiters. Although a waiter's job is never easy, it's a totem pole or chain of command, and oftentimes the supervisor was left to serve. A few employees would take shifts. A lot of employees were furloughed. It was just many different restaurants just had to adapt depending on what they were going through. And that's because not every restaurant is your big name. It's not your fancy steak houses and things like that. Some are just local mom and pop shops. Some are just small restaurant chains. Some are just diners. And a lot of these individuals were seeing big, heavy losses. And that's because of the restrictions that no one was allowed to eat. Then also you had the little scare. Like I mentioned, I always felt like individuals should just wear the proper gloves and masks and things and hair nets and things like that when they're making food. However, because of that, and because we all understood that this was now the new requirements, and you would go to certain restaurants and see that the workers weren't properly covered up. While they're, you're peeking through the window, you can see them in the back to the kitchen, and you can see they're not, wearing the proper gear. It did make a few people hesitant. So a lot of people tried staying home and just cooking at home and making some meals with the family and just enjoying the time together. But if anyone was like me during the pandemic, eventually you got tired of cooking. At some points, I didn't realize how much before the pandemic I was ordering out. Now, I always keep a budget, so, if I have some money to play around with, more than likely, again, I'm a restaurant kind of girl. I will more than likely order out. But during the pandemic, I did cut back a whole lot. I was able to save some good money during that time as well. And because of that, eventually I got tired. I'm like, let's just order some takeout. I heard one of my favorite bars had opened back up. They weren't allowing indoor dining, but they were allowing outdoor dining. So it was definitely good to get out and, be back to what kind of felt like normal. But you still had the understanding that things just weren't going to go back, right? I want to say about 6 months after the shelter-in-place order had went out in the year 2020, about 15% of all restaurants and bars or eating and drinking establishments permanently closed. And that's according to the National Restaurant Association. Now, that's just an estimate. It's very close to that number. However, I do know some restaurants around me just have not opened back up. Owners don't see it happening. A lot of individuals who may have benefited from the PPP, which was the Paycheck Protection Plan, that the government issued out to certain businesses as sort of a way to get the economy back stimulated. A lot of those smaller restaurants were not able to see, the benefits of that. So a lot of them were forced to close. Now, again, although during the summer months, a lot of restaurants were able to see, something that felt at least close to normal as possible. A lot of restaurants that came and went, right? So once it started getting cold again around the September timeframe of 2020, a lot of restaurants saw even bigger decline in sales than they did prior to the shelter in place. And that's because the second wave was projected to hit. During that time, I know me personally, I knew people and other people that knew me. We had experienced some losses during that time. So that second wave of COVID hit. And if anyone was paying attention to the news like I was just more so prone to stay in the house. And then again, the shipment and the delivery, Amazon Prime is very, very addictive. There was the Amazon groceries, so you can order your food that way. The grocery store that I lived around, it was pretty low key, so only, elderly really went there. Maybe you might have saw some young shoppers going there from time to time. So that's where I was getting most of my food from. And again, I just wasn't really comfortable with anyone delivering my food because, I'm big on using Uber Eats and DoorDash and all of those great guys. But during the pandemic, especially during the height of it, I was just very hesitant. So I'm sure others were as well. And based off of the statistics on how those businesses fared during that time, lets me know that I wasn't alone in those thoughts. Everyone was just more so concerned about their health and their safety. And eating out at restaurants and allowing others to handle your food just kind of rubbed some people the wrong way. Now, I know a lot of people as well who still were traveling during that time or were eating at restaurants in other countries. But even in those other countries, there were tight restrictions, and for some places you couldn't eat indoors. There were shields up everywhere. You had to have your mask on when you go in. And that alone is just a little uncomfortable. You're sitting at your table, your mask is on. You can take it down, you eat. You might have to use the bathroom, got to put your mask back on. So for some people, just staying home was more convenient than anything else. So because of that, restaurants definitely saw a loss. The projected amount of money the sales loss was about $240 billion by the end of 2020. So again, a lot of restaurants saw some hits, but some restaurants fared pretty well, specifically the fast food industry. So we're going to get ready to take a quick break. When we come back, we'll get into the fast food industry, how they were thriving during the pandemic or able to recover better during the pandemic once certain shelter-in-place restrictions were lifted. We'll get into how you can maybe get into the restaurant industry on your own, especially now that things are changing. We're seeing a pivot in almost every industry. I think this is the perfect time to hop in, so stay tuned for that. And then we'll get into some hometown heroes, all right? So stay locked in. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for a podcast that gives you all of the latest news from the world of finance? Then check out the GSMC Financial News Podcast. We'll delve into the ups and downs of the stock market, changes in the economy, and news from the world of real estate and technology. From breaking news on the New York Stock Exchange, NASDAQ, or the overseas market, to updates on the bond market, if there's money to be made, we'll cover it on the GSMC Financial News Podcast.
And we're back, and again today we're talking about the restaurant industry and how it's been faring during this crazy time of the pandemic. A lot of industries have seen a fall in sales. In particular, the restaurant industry has seen a fluctuation. So during the 2020 time frame of the pandemic, a lot of restaurants saw a decrease in sales. A lot of individuals, who may have worked at certain restaurants between 10 to 15 years were now jobless. Everyone did not qualify for unemployment, and every restaurant did not qualify for the Paycheck Protection Plan. So because of that, a lot of individuals were, more so sheltering in place like the CDC recommended and like some governments have regulated. However, one sector of the restaurant industry, we saw a shift in how, individuals ate. So normally, we'll take it back to around 2019-ish. That was right before the pandemic. Those who ordered food through third-party apps was already at a big high. I'm one that does it as well. It's just easier, especially if you're having a party. During that time, you could just put your whole order on, say, Grubhub, and they would they get a driver, the driver goes and picks it up, and they drop it off. Very, very easy. You don't actually have to go through the hustle and bustle of traffic to go get your food. So that has already been on the increase. Again, e-commerce, automation, technology is just taking over. So we were definitely seeing, that grow over time. And casual dining. So, just your regular, maybe your Applebee's, your Fridays, those restaurants, they were seeing a decrease in sales, but they were still number two. Fast casual, and then you had your mid-scale, and then your fine dining. They were all lagging behind that ordering out. So once the pandemic hit in 2020, we saw a high increase in the number of third-party apps that were being used. Although I was skeptical to have anyone deliver my food, I'd had rather go and just order it myself if I was going to order out. A lot of individuals figured I'm going to stay in place, let the essential workers do what they do. And that's to go, to do the back and forth on certain apps. So as a driver, you can sign up to either, like for Uber, for example, you can sign up to be a regular driver, or you could sign up to be a food delivery person. During the pandemic, a lot of individuals were out of a job. So a lot of people ended up signing up for these kind of jobs like the ride share and for the food delivery. So 2020 definitely saw an increase. Casual dining began to decrease. And then, your mid-scale and your fine dining, they kind of stayed the same. Your fast casual definitely saw a little bit of an increase in 2020 than it was in 2019. And in 2021, casual dining became much bigger than it was. So right now we're starting to see how things are beginning to bounce back. The numbers are starting to fluctuate back to how they were before. But fast food has definitely seen an increase. A lot of people, you can't go into the restaurant, but you want to get out the house. You might want to go for a ride. I remember going for a few rides. I'm just like, man, I'm getting cabin fever. I got to get out of here. So, you might ride to your favorite restaurant, your favorite fast food restaurant, get some French fries. One fast food restaurant in particular that I saw just lines wrapped around blocks was Chick-fil-A. In my opinion, Chick-fil-A was just able to really adapt to the changes that they were seeing in the market. I always love the way they do their customer service and things of that nature, but it was very interesting. I had one like right around the corner from my house before I moved during the pandemic, and they were just able to really deal with the demand of customers. They turned the whole parking lot into a drive-through because, again, you weren't allowed to eat indoors. So you weren't even allowed to go in to order your food. At that time, it was strictly drive-through ordering. And the way they were moving this line, I remember one day I looked at the line and I'm just like, there's no way I'm about to wait in the line for some Chick-fil-A. Like, I love the food, love everything about it, but I'm just not waiting. But I really, really wanted to lemonade. So I'm like, I'm just going to wait in this line. I want to say I was in the drive-thru for maybe 10 minutes before my order was taken. And then I was in that wait from after you take your order to the drive-thru window for maybe another 5 minutes. So altogether, I want to say it was roughly close to 20 minutes. To me, I thought that was amazing because, again, there were so many cars, and every car you saw was just full of like a full family. So, they were ordering at least 4 meals. So I'm like, I didn't think I was going to get my food that fast, but some restaurants were just able to really adapt to the changing times. Now, some other experts believe that the fast food market share is going to continue to increase. It's almost like people forgot how convenient fast food really was. But the young people specifically did not forget. So young people were some of the biggest, I want to say millennials and under, were some of the biggest spenders at restaurants. Now, I can attest to this. The older aunts in my family were not having it. They were not eating out anywhere. They didn't care what the deal was, what the plan was. Like, no, it's a health crisis outside. We're sticking indoors. We're going to shop indoors, right from our living room. We're not leaving. Family reunions were canceled. All kinds of gatherings were canceled because no one wanted to be, exposed. No one wanted to expose anyone else. And again, different generations take in information differently. So I feel like the young people were a little less fearful of what was going on. everyone was definitely aware. You couldn't help but to be aware, but just a little less fearful. So experts are definitely seeing an increase of about 8% in that market. Now, the big pizza shops that did, great during that time, during the transition, was Domino's and Papa John's. And then you had the big fast food restaurants like McDonald's and Wendy's. Now, while they saw a dip in sales in the beginning of when the pandemic, the shelter in place orders were in place, that was around, I want to say, between February to April. I would give that the beginning 3 months of the shelter in place orders. Those restaurants, they definitely saw a dip in service, but at this point, full service restaurants are seeing an even bigger, they're seeing even bigger fall in sales because a lot of it has to do with stock. So you'd be surprised if you look up your favorite restaurant to see the brand that actually owns the restaurant, or who owns a majority of the share of the restaurant. So if you look at their stocks, you can tell who and what, impacted them, who's doing okay, who is doing terrible. Some restaurants like Olive Garden, they fell. Dine Brands owns IHOP and Applebee's, and that stock fell over 30%. But again, those fast food restaurants, their stocks actually went up about 11%. And then you have your Chipotle's and your Qdoba's. They saw an increase in their stocks as well. So during that time, I know for me, I've always been into stocks, but during the pandemic, I definitely paid attention more. I learned that from when the market crashed in '08. I was coming of age, and I was able to really pay attention. A lot of things that happen in the stock market directly reflect what we see on our day-to-day. So it was definitely interesting to take a look at those stocks and kind of go over their year, and in some brokerage apps, or you can even Google a lot of businesses. You can go to like places like Yahoo Finance as well, and you can see how those stocks are faring and see how the restaurants are doing. Now, what got some of the young people spending was definitely the stimulus checks. I can definitely say a lot of young people felt as though this is literally given to us to help us, with bills and past debt and to stimulate the economy. So when you're young and you've been itching to get outside, you're definitely going to look for a leisure activity. And one of the calmest and chillest activities is eating. At least for me, I love to eat. So a lot of my friends were definitely checking out restaurants during this time. And a lot of it was going back to local businesses. So that's why you were able to see that there was a drop in, your fast casual and your fine dinings and your mid-scale restaurants. You were seeing a drop in those sales as well, because even though those restaurants were closed for dine-in options, they were still open for takeout, and some were also still open for delivery. However, because we were able to see how the employees were affected by this, a lot of individuals rallied around their local businesses. Now, I'm sure you know that during times of crisis, people tend to go with who they trust. And if your local deli or your local mom and pop shop has been open since, before your grandma was born or before your great uncle was born, they've always been a staple of the community. When there's times of crisis, those are normally the places that individuals tend to rally around, especially with the shelter in place orders. There wasn't much you can do besides go for a walk. In some instances, that could be difficult depending on where you live. So a lot of individuals were really just stuck in the house. So a lot of those local places were able to see an increase in the demand for what they offered at their restaurants. Now, while some third-party apps saw an increase in, performance and in delivery, like Grubhub, they saw their net sales jump 41%. So a lot of those third-party places were able to see an increase. However, because these local mom and pop shops are now getting, more tech savvy, more innovative, they are able to compare how much they're charging for delivery, the distance that they go. They might want to extend that, and some have extended their radius from 2 miles to almost 4 miles, because they were able to see that some customers stopped spending with them, not because they didn't want their food anymore or because they were fearful of eating out, but simply because some of the third-party apps were raking in fees. They were charging so many fees that even drivers weren't able to see real profits. A lot of debates were going on, especially on Twitter during that time. A lot of individuals were talking about tipping your driver and to tip in cash or to cash app the actual driver. Don't tip through the apps, because the app services, the platform is actually getting more money than the restaurant or the driver combined. So a lot of individuals at these restaurants, these local places, were seeing how the fast food industry was pivoting and decided to get quicker, more reliable delivery options, hiring multiple drivers, so that they could cut down the price of delivery and also meet the demand of their customers. At the pandemic, a lot of individuals lost their jobs, so the leisure activity of eating out became very, very hard for many families. So a lot of local restaurants were looking for different ways to adapt and to be similar to the fast food sector, who was able to recover some losses very quickly, right? So we're getting ready to take a quick break. When we come back, we're just going to be talking about some ways that you might be able to start your own restaurant right now during this pivot in the industry. And then we'll get into some hometown heroes. So stay locked in. We'll be right back.
Do you work in the world of marketing and advertising? Are you a media buyer or the owner of an agency? Have you been looking for a podcast to help stay on top of all the goings on of those worlds? The GSMC Marketing News Podcast is dedicated to keeping you up to date on all things concerning marketing and advertising. Get the latest marketing news, from what major businesses have planned for the coming year to the newest trends in advertising, from podcasts, digital and streaming, to the old standbys of radio, television, and billboards. The GSMC Marketing News Podcast has you covered, whether you're a marketing agent or a business trying to expand your brand.
And we're back again. Today we're talking about the restaurant industry and just some data on it, how a lot of restaurants saw a decrease in sales, how the overall industry saw close to $250 billion in lost sales, and how a lot of young individuals were the biggest spenders at these restaurants. And the fast food industry actually fared pretty well, especially the big fast food names like Wendy's and McDonald's. And then you saw some local mom and pop shops do pretty well as well, because a lot of individuals were a little nervous to eat at other places that they weren't too trusting of, but everyone tends to trust their local mom and pop shop. So some of those brands were also seeing an increase in sales as well, or they were just able to bounce back from the loss that they took during the beginning of the pandemic. So right now we're just going to discuss how you can begin to maybe run your own business, especially during the pandemic. Some experts are saying that this was the best time to start a restaurant business because you were really able to meet the demand of the market at a moment's notice. So I remember in the beginning of the pandemic, a lot of individuals and some experts suggested that we were just going to see like a second baby boom movement. I'm sure a lot of my old heads can attest to this, and I can attest to the individuals in my family. A lot of the older individuals are baby boomers from that generation. The first baby boom was when the individuals were coming back from the war, and a lot of babies were born during that time. Just to put it very frank, both my parents are a part of that generation, and my mom's father was a war vet as well. So that was definitely a big, big boom of babies in the society, right? Well, experts thought that the same thing was going to happen. So because everyone's sheltering in place, it's not much else to do. We put our mature mind, put your mature mind to the bottom line. A lot of experts believe that many babies were going to be born during this time. However, although I've seen a few pandemic babies, what we have seen is an increase in ownership. So a lot of individuals are realizing that they can't just rely on one source of income. One source of income is actually not reliable. There was at one point in time in our history where a local factory job could support a whole family of maybe close to 7 to 10 individuals that made up the whole family. One job could support that. Now we're seeing where that's not the case. 2 incomes in some households is not enough to support the full family. That's why if you've been paying attention to the news lately, you've been seeing the fight for minimum wage to go up. A lot of individuals are speaking on inflation and how the cost of living continues to go up, but minimum wage has not gone up. So people are starting to get just a little crafty, I like to say innovative on how they're creating those multiple streams of income. And one industry that we saw a big increase in is starting a restaurant in the middle of the pandemic. That industry has definitely grown. Now, it might sound like it's ill-advised. It might sound like a terrible idea to some. How do you start a business when almost every business had to shut down and everything was closed? But the actual truth is, it's not the case. This is actually the perfect time because, a lot of startups are looking to be more agile. They're able to keep up and adapt more with the shifting environment. You find a great space and you let everyone know. A lot of new restaurants were able to get customers to rally around the understanding that a lot of the owners had maybe lost their main means of income, and they were, a local person from the neighborhood. They've been in the neighborhood over 10 to 15 years, and they found found the space. They're looking to buy back the block. What that means is, you look around your neighborhood and see what needs some sprucing up, see which buildings should be bought and renovated. So a lot of restaurant owners were doing that. And they were able to get their local neighborhood to rally around them. And they were able to see that, again, the pricing of everything is it's a great time to purchase property. The rates are just so great right now. You can lease, you can rent, you can buy. So a lot of these restaurant owners were able to see that. They were able to see the shift in the economy. They were able to see the pricing of certain business locations. A lot of restaurants had to close, had to sell, so new ownership was able to take over and really get the neighborhood rallied around them. Then they were able to go ahead and create their own restaurants, already adapt with a food delivery service, with the restaurant having a food delivery app, with them having multiple drivers and being able to service multiple areas as opposed to before where the restaurant might just deliver to one zip code. These restaurants are coming out the gates with multiple zip codes, multiple, locations, teaming up with people around their city. Hey, you open a location here. So you open restaurant A, I open restaurant A number 2. And so everyone understands that this is a group effort. It's really bringing the community together. So a lot of individuals are rallying around this, and you're starting to see an increase in the demand for different food options right now, especially because of the restrictions being lifted. People are looking for different places to go. They're trying to get back out there, but they're looking for a more intimate setting as opposed to before. If you go to a restaurant, you just sit anywhere. You might be around people you just don't know, so you're just not that comfortable. Now with restaurants opening with a certain capacity limit, with social distancing, with private area dining because of the social distancing. It's just giving those who go out to eat better options and better choices. So you ask, how can I start my own restaurant? What if I want to jump in on this wave of COVID restaurant babies, as they're called, right? So just a few tips on starting your own restaurant. Number one, you want to pick the concept and the brand. Are you looking for fine dining? Are you looking for it to be strictly seafood? Is it, down south seafood? Like, you go visit your uncle and your aunts down south and you're, sitting next to the bay and you can go out and, pick your own fish and they cook it and fry it up for you right then and there. Are you looking to do fast food? Do you have enough capital to buy a closed down drive-through location and renovate it and make it your own? What's your concept? What are you looking to sell? Are you looking for a fast casual where you can maybe have a build your own taco bowls, things of that nature? So you want to pick the style, you want to pick the brand and the concept. Then you want to create your menu. You want to be careful with creating your menu, especially right now during the pandemic, and I would say beyond. A lot of restaurants are, if they haven't already, they should be adapting to the ride sharing, the food delivery services. So with that, you want to make sure that your meals are good and that they can uphold, during maybe a long drive from, this delivery driver might have to do 4 stops from the same restaurant in the same area. Are you the last one, the customer? Are you the last one on the drop-off list? You want to make sure your food is okay to go through that whole drive, still be hot or still taste fresh. So because of that, you want to make sure you're picking a good menu, something that the customers love. And in the beginning stages, this gives you a lot of room for growth. Customers are a lot more vocal in the beginning, especially when you're new. They want to tell you what you should do, what you shouldn't do. So this is a great time to start prepping. You might, before you even hit market, you might want to start working on your dishes. Well, you should be working on your dishes to get feedback, test it out. You might want to leave that dish out on the counter for maybe 15, 20 minutes to see how it does and then go back. Does it still taste as good as it was when it was fresh? Fried foods tend to get soggy after a while, so you might want to hold off on doing fried food for a little bit. Those might only be a, in-restaurant choice, things of that nature. So just be mindful picking your menu. And then you want to write a restaurant plan, a business plan. Every business should have a plan. The business plan to me is more than trying to get funding and trying to raise capital or trying to get a loan. To me, the business plan is truly the timeline or the anatomy, which I would say is a better example. It's more so the anatomy of the business. And over time, you can see how that body is getting stronger and stronger. So always have a business plan and always update the business plan as you go along. Then from there, you want to obtain the funding. So you might do a crowdsourcing. You might do the traditional route of getting a bank loan or a line of credit. You might have some family that can give you donations. Or you might just be, funding it yourself. You might be truly bootstrapping the brand until you've grown a following. And then from there, you're able to go and obtain some funding. So you definitely want to make sure your credit is good if you're going to look out for those business loans. Building business credit is always a good thing. So that's definitely an option. But you definitely need funding to keep a restaurant rolling, right? For example, the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Plan, that was for a lot of restaurants who were not able to cover the costs during a loss. So that now that we know that things like this can happen, you just want to stay ready. So when obtaining funding, you want to maybe put in there, emergency funds, just in case a natural disaster or a pandemic or a market crash happens. How are we going to sustain ourselves? So that should all go into when you're looking for funding. You want to choose a good location. Are you going to have, pop-up locations? Are you going to find a good solid brick and mortar? How are you going to go about, having customers come to you? So you want to find a good location. I would say lease. It's nothing wrong with owning, but with restaurants, you might want to grow You might want to get bigger. You might want to move. So leasing might be the best option. Always make sure you're incorporated. So you want to have your permits, your licensing in place. You want to make sure everyone's cook, serve safe. You want to make sure, you're in compliance with your local, state, and local government regulations on having a restaurant. And then from there, you want to make sure you're giving your space a good look. Nothing is worse than going to a restaurant where you can't tell if they just started construction or what. You want to make sure this space is nice and inviting, and that goes back into choosing the concept and the brand. You want to make sure that you're giving your customers something to look forward to when they're coming. The ambiance, to me, is always good. Then you want to have a good food supplier. You want to make sure you have the right equipment. You want to make sure you have that industrial stove and that industrial freezer, because you might have to freeze some things and you might have to store other things. You might have to cook things in a certain way. So you want to make sure you have the right equipment and that you can afford that equipment. So that goes back to your business plan. That's why you need a business plan that lets everyone, including yourself, know how much you actually need to get this business running. And then you want to make sure you're advertising yourself right. You're hiring the right staff. Nothing worse than rude waiters. We don't like rude waiters. So you want to make sure your people are definitely customer friendly and things of that nature. And then you want to make sure you're promoting yourself. To me, word of mouth is great, especially with food, because I trust what people say about the food. I always look at food reviews, so that's something that you want to keep in mind. But you still want to promote yourself in a traditional way. You might want to do the old school way of handing out flyers around the neighborhood. You want the community to rally behind you, so I would definitely make sure I'm advertising myself in the right way. And then you want to have a soft open. You don't need to do a grand opening like before. I don't think COVID would allow it at this point anyway. So you might want to have different dates for when you're having your opening so that multiple customers can come, taste test the food, have some prizes to give away, things of that nature to kind of get that community rallying around you, okay? So again, that's just some different tips on how you can start owning your own restaurant and some ways that some other restaurants are faring during this time. You might want to look at those restaurants and see how they're doing it during this restaurant boom, okay? So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to get into our hometown heroes, all right? Stay locked in. We'll be back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Today we're talking about the restaurant industry. We briefly discussed how the restaurant industry started back in France, how it's recovered, how it's beginning to recover, I should say. A lot of restaurants had to close. The National Restaurant Association projected that 100,000 restaurants, including bars, and sit-in restaurants were closed due to the pandemic. The industry saw close to $250 billion in lost sales. A lot of your fast casuals and your mid-scale and your fine dining and the like saw a tremendous drop in sales because they had to close their doors. Although many of them were able to do takeout and take advantage of delivery services. However, a lot of local restaurants weren't a fan of the delivery services because of the fact that those delivery services rake in a whole lot in fees and taxes. I know for one delivery service that I no longer use, there was a Philadelphia service fee. So just for living in the city of Philadelphia, we had to pay an additional fee to have food delivered through the app. So there's no way. I can just, I like to say that I'm a little bit of a lazy takeout person. I don't like to do too much work. So what I ended up doing was just taking those rides. It was the shelter in place order going on during the beginning of the pandemic anyway. It was nothing like getting out the house during that time. So I would just take a ride around the corner to my favorite spots and pick up my food that way. A lot of individuals were not able to, though. And a lot of those drivers who do the delivery were seeing a loss in sales as well, because if the host app is making so much money in fees that the driver is no longer seeing any type of profit and they're relying solely on tips, and a lot of individuals were not tipping like normal because there was a loss of income, you can see how that's a domino effect. So a lot of restaurants were seeing some fluctuation. The fast food industry was seeing the biggest recovery and also an increase in sales. We also learned that there was a lot of information to be found in the stock market. So if you pay attention to the groups who own certain fast food and certain other restaurants, if you see their stocks falling, you can understand why those restaurants were not doing so well. When you saw stocks increasing, you were able to see certain restaurants doing better. And then we discussed, a few ways that you can own your own restaurant, and how right now is one of the best times to get into the restaurant industry because you're coming into it all with all of the regulations. It's easier for someone who's new to adapt to a changed environment than it is for someone who's been in that environment for a while to adapt to the new environment. So a lot of experts thought that there was going to be a second baby boom, like we saw before when a lot of our older veterans were coming back from war. A lot of experts thought that we were going to see the same thing happen right now because of COVID, because of all the shelter in place. What we ended up seeing was an increase in businesses, financial literacy, and one industry that definitely saw an increase in ownership was the restaurant industry, because it's easier, again, to get into the industry right now while it's pivoting than it would be for someone to adapt and to change how they spend their money, how they reallocate funds. It's just easier to happen when things are already in the midst of changing. This is one of the best innovative times. Normally, the big wave companies come about during a shift in the economy. So that's just something to be mindful of. So to get into our hometown heroes, one restaurant in particular, I actually have not been able to check them out as of yet. I just keep seeing some great reviews online. I've done some research on them. I love their following on social media as Poppy's Cuisine. That's in the DC area. So if you're ever in around DC or in the Baltimore area, that might be a restaurant you want to check out. And again, they are online on social media as Poppy Cuisine on Instagram. And if you're ever driving down there, they are on the corner of Washington and Fleet. And that's, again, in the DC area, particularly Baltimore, Maryland, to be exact. They do have a website that you can go to get your food delivered if you're in the area. Right now, they don't ship food. They do. At one point, I believe they were doing catering, but because of the pandemic, that stopped. They have gift cards. They have a special, it's like one of the most popular dishes is the crab cake egg rolls. A lot of individuals are ordering that. They also have delivery. You can make reservations. I do know the dine-in option was at one point closed, and then when restrictions started to lift, I believe there might have been limited seating. I know right now they're working on another location, like a full-blown restaurant, not like just your local shop where you can come and sit. They're looking for like fine dining style. So I think that's pretty cool that we'll be able to see. Now, during this time, there has been, a lot of people ordering from them, checking them out, just trying to figure out, who are they, and what's so different about what they offer than other restaurants. I just love the way the food looks, to be honest. That's what caught my eye. And then I was able to see the customer reviews. They are hailed from a lot of people. I spent a lot of time, before the pandemic, I was spending a lot of time in DC. I know a few manufacturers out there who help with some brands that I help run. And I always wanted to give this place a stop, but every time I go to that area, if I'm near Baltimore or DC, that whole area, I normally go get seafood. So next time I'm in the area, I'm definitely going to check out Poppy Cuisine. I think they're doing an awesome time during this pandemic. I remember at one point they ran into an issue. A bigger company, I won't begin to get into the details of that, but a bigger restaurant was starting to see a little bit of competition with Poppy Cuisine. At one point, the pandemic, it took over, and individuals were looking for a quick way to get some takeout food. And Poppy Cuisine in Baltimore, they were able to just meet the demands. However, the way the blocks are in that area of town, it was a lot of cars parallel parking all over the place. And at one point, some local restaurants and some local businesses and things of that nature began to call the police because of violations of how the individuals were parking. So to stay in compliance and not to, ruffle too many feathers, I like the way the owners of Poppy Cuisine handled everything. They figured out a better way to get the food to those who are waiting for takeout. They had a better system lined up. Whenever you're in business, you always want to make sure your systems are always being refined. So a lot of times people think that if you just own a business and you just run it and just sell your product, you'll make money, and then that's how it, that's just how it is. It's not necessarily the case. You want to make sure that you're actually meeting the demands of your customer, and you also want to make sure that your systems in place are a good thing. So again, for that example, they were starting to see some compliance issues because the demand for the food was so high during the pandemic. There just wasn't enough time to meet every order and get them in the space and out of the space as fast as possible. So you saw cars lined up around the block waiting for, again, those crab cakes and all the good seafood that they offer. So what they did was they had a system in place where they were doing it in waves, and if you were within that wave, you had a certain time frame to come pick up your food, and if you didn't, they had to move on to the next wave. So you definitely saw them pivot, try some different things, try some different tactics to meet the demands of their customers, to stay in compliance with local government, and to keep their neighborhood happy, right? When you're in a certain neighborhood, you definitely want to keep the constituents of that neighborhood somewhat satisfied, that you're not being overbearing or just being rude in the way that you're handling business. I think Poppy Cuisine did an amazing job when handling that issue. It was definitely one of my case studies during the pandemic. So shout out to them. That's definitely the number one hometown hero. And the second hometown hero is the Nourish Spot, and that's in Jamaica, Queens, New York. And they're on Brewer Boulevard. They're open Monday through Saturday with fluctuating hours, and Sundays they are closed. They also won the Small Business Association Micro Business of the Year in 2019, so I thought that was pretty cool. They make smoothies, salads, protein waffles. You can get a few different things made with some protein in it. I love smoothies. I had a smoothie today for breakfast. Interesting. So I definitely would suggest giving them a try. They have some cool things. I think that's a little innovative is They have some apparel, like sweatshirts, hoodies. They have hats, t-shirts. You can get a tote bag. You can purchase an apron from them. I think that's really cool when brands figure out a way to meet their customers where they are. Everyone loves a good hoodie. So I think having some apparel in place for the loyal customers to buy and to be those brand champions for you, I think that's pretty awesome. Again, they make all kinds of things like salad smoothies. You can get natural juice blends. They have sandwich wraps, yogurt parfaits. They have a lot of other things. They have foods that fight things such as diabetes, heart disease, and cancer. They really try to find the best way to keep healthy items. That's why they are the Nourish Spot. They're looking to nourish their clientele, their customers. I think that what they're doing is pretty awesome during this time. They've been getting some pretty good press, especially during the pandemic. With the pandemic and the health crisis that we're in, a lot of individuals are looking for better, healthier options to eat and better places to shop. So I think that smoothie restaurant, the Nourish Spot, is doing a pretty good job. So again, those are my two hometown heroes today. That's Poppy Cuisine in Baltimore, Maryland, near the DC area. And then you have the Nourish Spot in Jamaica, Queens, New York. So if you're ever in those two cities, make sure you give them a holler, check them out. You want to show love to the small businesses, especially during the pandemic. These are the businesses who have seen some of the biggest drop in sales. So you just want to keep them rolling, keep them going. The country depends on small business owners, all right? So thank you for listening to the GSMC Business Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. Again, I'm your host, Moriah. I would just like to thank you all for listening. Please make sure you subscribe, show some love, write a nice review. We're constantly tweeting on Twitter, so if you haven't, check out GSMC Business Podcast on Twitter, giving some trends, updates, some funny memes to get the week started. So make sure you check us out, all right? Thank you all so much for tuning in. Take care.
You've been listening to the GSMC Business News Podcast, part of the GSMC Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type GSMC into your favorite podcast app to find all of the shows from the GSMC Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, from business news to weird news. Please subscribe to the podcast and follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's podcast.